Well, you hit on it a little bit. I remember coming out of the 80s and early 90s, meeting with developers and investor groups, and everybody just said, I'll look at anything but a master plan community. And they made many of the same statements that the scale of them, the number of years it takes to develop one, you're in them so long, you're going to go through at least one downturn, and you don't make any money, and master plan communities are really not going to happen. And here we are, 20 years later, and we've got a bunch of them, and they've done well. And I can't prove it, but I believe that we will see a continuation of that same concept, probably taken to another level, the way we have with the town centers in our future. And it'll happen somehow, and it partly will happen because the consumer will demand it, and we'll figure out. I'm looking at Larry and Ted. They figure out how to get the money, somehow, and make the numbers work. And I don't know how they do it. I don't know why they do it, but they do. Why you do it. So, I think that we will see it. And I was on another panel a year or so ago that the Business Journal put together, and at the end there was a question: what will Houston look like in 30 years? And given a lot of the same topics that we just discussed, and my answer is it'll look very similar to what we have today, only bigger. And we'll be commuting from, Conroe to, not Conroe, Huntsville and Sealy and areas further out, but they won't all be driving to the central business district. They won't even be coming to city center to go to work. There'll be employment centers that are a little further out on the fringe, and the city will benefit from what I think is a relatively low density with some these hot spots of high density jobs and shopping, et cetera, where the economics work. And it'll be a fabulous place to live. I think, one of the things that we haven't talked about today at all, which I'm a little surprised about, is that how will the cost of energy affect suburban development trends and consumer preferences? And this is just an opinion based upon what we saw in California, where housing was extremely expensive. Commute times were often 2 hours. People would buy a house 2 hours away from where they worked. And gasoline prices in California have been at 75 cents to $1 or $1.50 more expensive than they have been in Texas for a long time. And people were willing to make that choice because that's what they wanted. They wanted a house with a yard and a place to send their kids to good schools. And I think, a lot of the charts, the headlines that Charlie showed at the beginning about predicting the end of suburbia, when you look at who the speaker was, the person who was quoted, there's an agenda there that I'm reminded of a book that I found on my bookshelf. We're moving our offices, so I was cleaning out, and I found one of my favorite quotes. And the older I've gotten, the more appropriate it is. It says, "I have abandoned my search for the truth, and now I'm looking for a good reality or a good fantasy." So those people are saying what they hope will happen, because I think in many cases that's what they want to manage the world into. And consumers, we find, often are at odds with what some of these people want to see happen. And we're a good example of that. I think what we saw already in California is that it's hard to stifle people's desire to have their own place to live and raise their family. And
Carl Jung, one of the fathers of psychoanalytics, said exactly that in 1864, I believe. Everyone wants their own little space, not a chicken coop.
The question always comes up about energy prices and what happens when gasoline is really expensive. And what we found in the energy crisis of the 70s, late 70s, was that rather than people uprooting themselves from their suburban communities and moving closer to dense jobs in the downtown, the reverse happened. The companies chose to relocate from higher cost inner city land out to the lower cost suburbs to be closer to their employees. If you just think about land economics, that makes all the sense in the world. So the response is rarely to uproot people from those homes and those neighborhoods and those schools and move them into a higher density inner city area to be close to work. It's almost always now in this world going to be the reverse.
I don't think it's a secret that Exxon purchased some land on the north side of Houston, and one of their very polite requests was that the Grand Parkway be completed next year. Not a coincidence.
Well, I think we are about to reach our allotted time plus 30 minutes. But since the other panel ran long, I don't mind running along either. I'm told that it will not diminish Jones and Carter's contribution. So please, if you're going to attend the cocktail hour, please join us. But before we do, I'd like to first thank all the panel members for their participation. I would like to also thank Roger Hord for being the brave soul first to step up and ask a question from the audience, but also for his support in helping put this together. West Houston Association 3 years ago, I'm going to take the moderator's prerogative for a cheap plug here. 3 years ago, we published the West Houston Plan 2050, which was basically, let's look at what Houston, and particularly the West Houston, greater West Houston area will look like at the year 2050. It's a little further out than some people, including HGAC at the time, were looking. We have just finished an update, kind of a, this is where we are, and we continue to look forward. There are copies. If you would like a copy, they are out here on the table, along with a large version of our 2050 map that is a graphic representation of how we see the region developing. Keep in mind that this is better than, I think, better than a little bit of an educated guess, because we've got 40 years of history to work from. And we firmly believe that, as Mike said, at 2050, we think that our community will look a lot like it does today. We'll probably have more city center type projects a little further out. Katy or Cinco Ranch, the Bridgelands. I'm not sure if Brookshire will have one. I know Waller wants to have one. So that's where we're headed. We have a lot of challenges. Our challenge as ULI leaders is to be leaders in the growth of this community and help drive to higher standards for everybody. And I hope that we're all up to that task. Thank you so much for attending. You've been very patient.